Good morning. My name is Donna Ann Knapp. I'm the Small Business Development Manager within the Broward County Office of Economic and Small Business Development. Thank you all for joining us for another installment of our semi-annual series, You Have a Contract, Now What? Over the next 3 days, from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., you'll be hearing from experts from Broward County agencies who will provide insight on various county processes and highlight contractual requirements of which you should be aware as a newly awarded vendor or a pre-existing vendor when performing as a prime vendor or lower tiered vendor on a Broward County government contract. The last 30 minutes of each of our sessions on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week will be reserved for questions and answers. You'll be able to submit your questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A button and typing your question in the field and submitting it. We'll, of course, answer it during the last 30 minutes of the session, which is dedicated to Q&A. When you registered for today's session, you should have received the links for not just today's session, but also those taking place tomorrow and on Wednesday. Please note the speakers on each of these 3 days will be different, and so will the content. So we invite you to join us on each of the 3 days. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Candace Jensen and Angela Salinas, who both work in the Facilities Management Division, which is a division within Broward County's Public Works Department. The Facilities Management Division, or FMD, oversees quite a lot of contracts here in Broward County, including most of the county's grounds maintenance and janitorial services contracts. Our two speakers today are subject matter experts and have a wealth and breadth of knowledge on best practices in doing business with FMD. Candace Jensen is a maintenance contract manager and has over 33 years of experience with Broward County. Before assuming her current role with FMD, she worked for Broward County Parks Division. She has experience in working in the libraries, the accounting division, water and wastewater division, metropolitan planning organization, and the transit division. Her co-presenter, Angela Salinas, is a contract grant administrator senior within the contract section of the Facilities Management Division, or FMD. And she spent 14 years in the Town of Davies Procurement Division, 2 years with Broward County's Purchasing Division, and has spent her last 4 years working on overseeing FMD contracts. With that, I introduce you to Candace Jensen and Angela Salinas. Ladies, take it away.
Good morning. Should I go ahead and get started? Okay, so congratulations. You have now been awarded a new contract with Broward County Facilities Management Division. If you see on your screen, these are some of the contracts that our division oversees. We manage and service over 200 buildings. We have janitorial services, grounds maintenance services, plumbing repairs and on-demand services, as well as a multitude of other additional services that are provided for our buildings. Next. So once you're awarded a contract, your assigned contract grant administrator will schedule a kickoff meeting with you. That'll meet any cutover period that's required under your contract. This meeting provides introductions between the vendor and county staff. The vendor may also be asked to invite some key staff, which could include some of their subcontractors, consultants, managers, supervisors, and any of their accounting staff that they feel necessary that should attend this meeting. The Facilities Management Division Contract Administrator will explain in detail contract compliance requirements and required deliverables. To your right there is just a screenshot of a kickoff meeting agenda. Again, a list of key county staff and any applicable schedules will be provided following this meeting. And there will be time allotted for any questions that the vendors or any of the field staff or any of our building managers may have. Next. Okay, I'm going to go over the county's living wage. The county's living wage rate. So the new living wage rate is effective each January. Every year, it's approved by the Board of County Commissioners. And I just want to clarify that there is no increase to any contract based on the new living wage rate. Take this into consideration when submitting a bid. There is, however, one exception to this, and that is when the board approves a special living wage rate increase. I want to go over how the living wage rate is approved. And if you see at the bottom of your screen, it shows you three different percentages of what the actual living wage rate is based upon. So the living wage rate is adjusted annually by the lowest of these three rates. So the first being the percentage increase in the consumer price index. The second is 3%, or the percentage across the board compensation increase provided by the county to unrepresented county employees. So again, it's the lowest of these three, and the max is 3%. So if you look to the right of the screen, I'm just going to go over a few of these special increases that have happened over the history of the living wage rate increases here. So in green, you'll see special living wage rate increase that was approved and passed by the board. Back in 2018 and in 2019, the board approved a special living wage rate increase. In 2021 in blue, you can see that there was an additional special living wage rate pursuant to the health portion of the living wage rate. So here it was just an increase to the health portion. And then in gray at the top of the spreadsheet that you're looking at, there was another special wage rate. And this was when they created a special wage rate for security service officers. And again, these are passed by the board and they are not the norm. Next. Okay, some helpful hints when you're thinking about submitting an offer to Broward County. So if the living wage rate applies to your contract, please keep in mind that the labor rate on your item response form, which is shown in this little screenshot of your bid, it should be at least exceeding the current living wage rate minimum. So for this slide, I have an example here, and it shows a living wage rate at the time of the bid submittal back in 2021 was $17.05. If you're looking below that, it shows the item response form submitted by the vendor. And here they submitted for site supervisor a rate of $16.24, which is well below the current living wage rate. And then if you look below that, you'll see full and part-time services, and those wage rates were submitted at the current living wage rate of $17.05. This is what you have to pay a covered employee, and that's an employee that works more than 20 hours per week under this living wage contract that you've received. Now, all rates should account for your company's overhead, office support, equipment, fuel, any runners, profit, and insurance. I just want to reiterate that everything should be captured in your bid submittal. Next. So in this next slide, I'm going to go over an example. The flow chart on the right depicts an example of a new living wage contract and when that is going into effect. So for example, you've received a contract and your contract begins on April 1st, meaning it's effective April 1st of 2025. I'm going to give you an example of a vendor A, your vendor A. Vendor A bid a porter hour rate of $20. The current living wage rate at the time was $19.21. That means vendor A's profit and overhead is 79 cents per hour. The new living wage rate in the following year, January 1st of 2026, has been increased and is now $19.79. Vendor A's profit and overhead is now 21 cents per hour. So it's gone down. Now we go into your next renewal period, and the new living wage rate is effective January 1st of 2027, is now a rate of $20.38. Vendor A's profit and overhead is now negative 38 cents per hour. But your contract still requires that you pay each of those covered employees a rate of $20.38 because that is the effective rate as of January 1st of 2027. So in the flow chart, I'm not sure if you can see it clearly, it's a little small, but you can see at the top, it's your contract was effective April 1st, 2025. That's your initial contract term. And in this scenario, it's a 1-year contract. There can be different initial terms. You can have a term of 1 year, a 2 year, 3 year, but remember that there is no increase to your contract during an initial term. So we go into the January 1st scenario here, January 1st of 2026, you've got the new living wage. And again, there is no increase to your contract based on that living wage rate going up. However, if your contract allows for it, some of the contracts do, you can receive a CPI or ECI increase. We'll go over that on the next slide. I'll give you a little bit more detail about that. But this slide is just going over the living wage rate and how that applies to your contract. Next. Okay, what we just discussed, the CPI ECI process. So a price adjustment request for the CPI ECI must be emailed to your contract administrator, and it must be consistent with the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Index. The increase cannot exceed 3%. The request must be submitted prior to the renewal date, and this information is stated in the solicitation document. It's usually between 90 and 120 days, but remember, you must make the request prior to your next renewal. So we just talked about an initial renewal period of 1 year. You'd have to make that request at the end of that first year to be eligible to get a CPI increase in your next renewal term. You must also submit documentation to support the need for that price adjustment, and it must be attached to your email request within those 90 days or up to 120 days prior. If you look at the screenshot there to your right, it shows you in this scenario, contract year 2, which is the renewal term. So the vendor requested within the specified time period with the correct documents, FMD processes your CPI ECI increase. And over to the right, the vendor did not request within the specified time period. So no price adjustment was awarded, and now they're having to wait for their next renewal period. Next. So I'm going to go over how Broward County operates with payments. So on your left side of the screen, you'll see a screenshot of a purchase order. This is Broward County's purchase order. They all look pretty much the same. And on your right is a corresponding invoice. So again, purchase order on the left and the vendor's corresponding invoice on the right. Remember that all invoices must include your purchase order number and, if applicable, a work order number. So the Facilities Management Division operates using work orders for any emergencies. Pretty much for all of our services, each service request will be assigned a work order number. Next. Okay, again, this is the same purchase order and the same invoice to the right of your screen. I just want to go over the payment process, and just note that Broward County's financial system requires a line-to-line match to process all invoices. That means that you get a purchase order and you have your invoice and they're both the same amount, you think, oh, it's a match. That's not the case here. It has to be a line to line match. So in this scenario, you see at the top of your screen there, line number 1 on the purchase order, unit price, $6,314.81. You see the vendor's invoice to the right. Line amount should match, and it is $6,314.81. Your second line shows you your item ID. That is your contract catalog line that matches your contract service items. So 2121632P1 underscore 7 underscore 016. This is your catalog line. And that should also be showing on your invoice. And here it does. The catalog line numbers match line 2. So the first portion of those numbers are the assigned catalog number, which is your contract number. And here in this case, there's a P at the end of that number, and that shows you that this was an RFP for our example. 7, the underscore 7, that shows you that that's the contract and the vendor contract number. And then the last 3 digits, 016, that shows you that's the line in your catalog. So those 2 numbers should match, purchase order and invoice. Now line 4 over here of this example shows you that the service should also match. In this example, it's North Regional Courthouse and it's cleaning supplies. So on the right, the vendor here has matched this perfectly. Line 4, it shows North Regional Courthouse and cleaning supplies. Next. So this is what I was just talking about. This screenshot here is an example of the corresponding catalog. Your contract administrator will provide a copy of your contract line items following your kickoff meeting to ensure that you can easily match your service lines on your invoice. And this is typically what your catalog looks like. Of course, it's a lot longer than this, but this is just a screenshot. Next. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Angela Salinas.
Thank you, Candace. Good morning, everyone. This next slide is vendor supplier automatic payments. And we recommend it if when you get awarded your contract that you actually do this, just because this is your automated clearinghouse. It's a direct deposit of your payments pretty much, just like you would get a direct deposit for your paycheck. This is us paying you, and this will speed up the process so you don't have to wait for a paper check. The first step is you would get this form, and we would supply this form to you, usually in your kickoff meeting, or your contract administrator would. You would complete the form in its entirety, including the purpose of transfer line. And that line would say something like payment of invoices, payment for services rendered, something along those lines. You would sign with an authorized signatory and 2 witnesses in blue ink. You cannot do digital signatures for this. They will not accept it. Step 3, you would return the original to the address listed on the form, either by mail or in person. And that is the Broward County Board of Commissioners, Records, Taxes, and Treasury Division. And that you cannot email it. You can't email it to your administrator. You have to turn it in person or by mail. And this process may take up to 1 month from the time you mail the original form in. So you could get your first check if your invoicing is a month and you don't have your transfer in yet. You would get your first check as payment, as a paper check, and then you would get your automatic transfers after that. Next slide. This is a screenshot of our vendor supplier payment status. And what this does is this, so you can go on there and see your payment status. You would need your vendor code, which is that first box right there. And your vendor code is on your PO. So the top of your PO, it'll say like your supplier line or your supplier number, and that is your vendor code. You can also get that from your contract administrator. If you can't find it or you're having issues finding it, they can supply it to you also. And you would register at the website right there at the top, and then you would be able to go in and see when payments have been made. Now, the purchasing division issues checks to vendors daily. Payment information will be available for viewing for up to 45 days. Next slide. Performance evaluations. Broward County rates each vendor on an annual basis. This enables vendors to see how they are performing and enables vendors to determine if any improvements are needed. The building managers are usually the ones that will do your performance evaluations, and those are the people that you usually work with on a day-to-day basis for your different buildings and your different services. This is an example of what your performance evaluations will look like. And you can see at the top, it says the agreement number and what the contract is, your not to exceed amount for your contract, the amount you've used. If you had a goal, if you were an SCB, there is a evaluation summary where someone may have put in some comments. You can see, you can have your score over there on the right in the middle. And then it tells below that, it tells you what your score means. If you're unsatisfactory or poor, or fair, good, excellent. And there's a whole lot more to this. There's a bunch of questions that your contract administrator or your building manager would fill out for you. And then if the scores are a 1 or a 2, they will be required to provide comments. So then you could also see the comments as to why you were scored that. Next slide. Security requirements. The background screening requirements for obtaining a contractor ID badge will depend on the facility to which unescorted access is being requested. Contractors may contact Broward County Security at 954-357-6000 or fmsecurity@broward.org for assistance. Please note that some facilities require county staff escort. You would also get this at usually your kickoff meeting or possibly before, once you've been awarded your contract. These security badges can take a little bit of time depending on how busy security is. We have had issues where 2 large contracts are getting approved at the same time, and there are a lot of badges being processed, and it can take a little bit longer. So your best bet is to do these as soon as you get them, just to make sure the process is good and you can start your contract on time. The security form you see right there is what will be filled out. There is a lot of information needed. You will have to do a background check and supply your employee's driver's license ID, a copy of that. If you ever have an issue with this, if you get it and you're not sure if something needs to be filled out, usually your contract administrator will send you this form and detailed instructions, and they're always there to help. So if you have any issues, you just call them. We want you to submit it correctly the first time. You can call them. You can call directly to Broward County Security. They're the ones that will be approving it, so they can really walk you through it if you need them to. Next slide. Insurance requirements. On the left, you see the insurance requirements provided by our risk management department, and these will be what is in your actual solicitation documents. And this tells you what will be required if you get awarded the bid. On the right-hand side is your certificate of liability, your COI. That's what you would provide to us, and they have to be up to date. So if you provide your new one right before the old one expires, if not, your contract administrator will be reaching out to you as soon as possible to get the new one. We do require an updated one on time. If you look, there are a few things that we sometimes see that the vendors will forget to have their insurance companies mark on there, and then that kind of delays it because we do have to send it back and have it correctly. They should match completely. So if you see the waiver of subrogation applies, on the left-hand side, it's marked. That means on your COI, it must also be marked or have a Y. That's left off a lot, and we have to send it back for a new one. And then also the Broward County as additional insured and the certificate holder. Your insurance, the requirements on the left will have that. You don't see the whole thing here, but at the bottom, it does tell you exactly who the certificate holder needs to be. And as you can see on the bottom here, it says Broward County and then our address. Sometimes it will say, we'll get ones that have Broward County Board of Commissioners, and then that's not correct. That has to be set back. So they have to match completely. And if you have any questions, again, you can contact us and we will walk you through it. But if it is incorrect, it will be sent back. Next slide. Deliverables. Some of your contracts, depending on what they are, may have certain deliverables, and a lot of them will be different. And some examples of deliverables that may be required are a copy of your training program, a list of equipment information, a copy of your quality control program, a copy of your contract with your CBE subcontractor, a transition plan detailing specific days on which products, supplies, and equipment shall arrive at each facility, appropriate staffing plan for each location, service plans and schedules for each location, project site logbook to be maintained at each facility. And these are examples. They could be completely different. You may have a few, you may have 2, you may have 15. It all depends on which contract you are awarded. And you can see some examples on the right-hand side. These are actual from some of our contracts. You see the new employee training log. That is how they're keeping track of what training their employees have had. That goes with their training program. You'll see this isn't equipment, but this is supplies. This is the supply spec sheet that we have to approve for some of our contracts. And then you see the project crew checklist of what they're doing, what description of the work they do, and each day that it's done. And you can usually, there's not a standard for what these are. We do have examples we can give you, but we usually allow you to come up with them yourself and supply them to us as long as it meets the requirements of your deliverables. Next slide. This is another deliverable. This is your subcontract agreement. So Prime and CBE, SB subcontractors must have an executed subcontract agreement. Some helpful hints for this just down the road, just to make sure that you don't have any issues with your subcontractor agreement. We don't tell you how this has to be done or how you have to do it, but we do have some hints that are helpful. Number 1, the subcontract agreement should define the actual service or services you as a subcontractor will be required to perform to meet the county's acceptance. The more details, the better. So there's no confusion down the road as to someone saying you were supposed to do this and you didn't know that. Number 2, will the agreed to percentage of the overall contract amount be sufficient for you as a subcontractor to pay your staff, cover overhead, including employee benefits, and provide a profit for your company? If you see the example, the compensation in this one is 10% of the compensation paid to the contractor by Broward County. So you would have to determine if that 10% is enough for you to actually do the job and pay your employees. Number 3, the subcontract agreement should also clearly state how these services will be invoiced. For example, if a monthly service that is performed will be the prime pay the subcontractor monthly, or will the prime pay the subcontractor when the county pays the prime? Next slide. Helpful hints when thinking about submitting an offer to Broward County. Number 1, all rates should account for your company's overhead, office support, equipment, fuel, runners, etc., profit, and insurance. This was talked about by Candace earlier. We just want to make sure that you are bidding the right amount, that you take all of that into account when you do price out your bids, because as she said, there aren't any increases in the first contract term. And we have seen people who come back and aren't making any money and want to know about increases, and that's not allowed. So number 2, if living wage applies, the labor rate on the item response form of the bid should at least exceed the current living wage rate minimum. Number 3, if living wage rate applies, the daily, weekly, bi-monthly, monthly, semi-annual, annual rates should account for at least paying your employees the current living wage rate minimum. You will know what the living wage rate is when your bid goes out or your RFP goes out. It's listed in there. It's also usually talked about in a pre-bid meeting if there is one. So, and you can request it, which you should before you submit your bid, because you want to make sure that you're taking that into account when you place your bid. We want you guys to succeed in all of your contracts, and we want to make sure that you are bidding it correctly so that you actually can be successful. Number 4, bidders should account for award processing time when calculating offers. For example, bids on average can take 3 months and RFPs on average 6 to 9 months to award. Please note that the above is an example only, and awards may take more or less time depending on other factors. So please remember that if you place a bid, it's not going to be awarded in 2 or 3 weeks. It does take longer than that. There is a lot that goes into it, and RFPs are even longer. So just take that into account, that when you are pricing everything out, that those prices have to stand firm, possibly even 6 to 9 months down the road before you even get awarded the contract. Next slide. Question and answers. We just want to say thank you guys so much for joining us today. I know this is a lot of information, but we do have plenty of chances to ask questions during the bidding process and after you get awarded the bid. Our kickoff meetings are full of great information, and you will meet everybody there. When you do get, when we do plan those, you'll meet all the people you'll be working with during the term of your contract, and you will have plenty of chances to ask any questions about your new contract.
Thank you very much, ladies. Before we launch into the Q&As, I just wanted to remind everyone, in order to submit your question, because during the presentation, the format is that you're on mute, and because there are several of you, it's a little tricky to unmute everyone. So please go ahead and you can click on the Q&A button. It should be towards the bottom of your screen, next to share and raise a hand, not the chat, but the Q&A button if you have any questions regarding the information that was shared with you by Candace or Angela. And while we're waiting, I think there may be one question already in the Q&A, and it says, what needs to be done if the invoice doesn't match the purchase order?
Okay, I guess I'll take that. So if your invoice does not match the purchase order, we're going to ask probably that you revise your invoice so that it matches. This typically happens when we call someone out for a repair. Neither party really knows how long it may take. They get out there and there's something that was unforeseen when they're doing the work, and they only accounted for 2 labor hours. And it ended up going later in that evening, and you may now have 4 hours for the work. What we can do is, in that scenario, we may ask you, probably most likely, to produce a second invoice for those 2 hours. But if it was just that the invoice was incorrect originally, we may ask you to revise your invoice. But again, if you have any additional service hours or unforeseen situation arises, we'll probably request a second invoice. And then we will issue a second purchase order.
Thank you. We have another question. It says, thank you for all this valuable information. I'm new in this county. I have a carpet cleaning company. What is my first step to offer my service to the county? Thanks. I can chime in before turning it over to Candace and to Angela. So typically most of Broward County's procurements are competitively solicited. Anything that is 100,000 and up is going to be competitively bid. We're in the process of switching over from Periscope S2G to Bonfire to a new system that we're going to call BPro. So all services would be advertised there, and vendors would be asked to respond. However, there is a possibility on an agency level where county agency buyers or CABs can use 3 quotes for services that they need. That would be under the $100,000 threshold, more like 70,000, but 7,000 rather. If it's not competitively solicited, but most of our requests are. I'll let Candace and Angela chime in as well.
Angie, you want to take that one? Because most of the carpet cleaning would fall under janitorial services for the most part.
All of our carpet cleaning and our janitorial services is included in the actual bid. So we have lines in the bid for that. I was actually just going to answer it the same way Donna Ann did, to sign up on what will be Bonfire, because most of our solicitations are done there. Or if we do ones that are under the threshold, we do look in the OESBD contractors list. for small businesses. And
I think we missed the very last part of what you said, Angela. I think somehow you went on mute. So just like the very last part.
you're right, I did. Sorry about that. I'm not sure how much you guys heard, but I did say that we do use OESBD's list of contractors if we are looking for a small business that we are sending it out ourselves.
Thank you. While we're waiting, in case anybody else has another question that they wanted to submit, Candace and Angela gave you some tips in terms of your subcontractor, prime vendor arrangement. While the county does not give you direct insight because we're not a party to that agreement, our county attorney's office tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday will have two separate representatives from our county attorney's office. They'll be joining us and they will be talking about general elements of a contract so that when you do engage in an agreement, you're aware of the basic elements that should be there between the prime and the sub. They're also going to touch on Broward County's own boilerplate contract language, so you know what the typical language is that you should expect. They will also tackle the cone of silence, how it could impact your award, bid protests, suspension, and debarment of firms. So definitely tune in tomorrow and on Wednesday to hear more legal insight and best practices. Give me 1 second. I think we have another. Will the sessions that are Tuesday and Wednesday provide? No, they will not. Thank you for asking that question. We have it intentionally set up so that our experts are providing new and different valuable information on each of the 3 days. So please feel free to tune in, but it won't be the same information. There may be one in the chat. Okay. Hello, we have a large format printing company and wall covering company too. Would like to know a person or department to contact to offer our services. Again, I think the same answer, Gustavo, that was given before. Most of our procurement solicitations are going to be competitively bid, and so you'll be able to find them currently on Periscope S2G. Hopefully everyone's aware we're moving from Periscope S2G. We're moving to BPro, which is powered by Bonfire. And so you'll be able to search for both past solicitations to have an idea of what the insurance requirement was on past solicitations that went out. You'll have an idea of who won it. You can do a little research for past ones as well to help prepare you for the upcoming ones. I think Candace may have referenced that we have initial contract terms that will also have renewal terms. So you'll be able to see what the solicitation timeframe was for some of these past ones that were advertised and help prep you for the new ones. It's also a good way of also kind of estimating how frequently these contracts will come back up again.
Oh, and Donna, I wanted
Yes.
to add one more thing in line there. When you are registering in, I guess, the new system, vPro, Periscope, make sure that you enter every single possible service that your company can provide. And the reason I'm saying that is how that system will send you notification to those bids. So you want to make sure that you select every single service that your company provides so that you'll get more notifications through the system. So just wanted to add that.
And thank you, team. You'll see on your screen for everyone in attendance, this will be the link, the QR code on the screen to taking you to register for the new BPro system that we're all talking about. There is a question in the Q&A and it asks, when will we switch from Periscope to the new BPro system? Really good question. We're thinking sometime in September is what I've heard most lately. So I'd say September, October. What the plan is if there's a current solicitation that's already posted in Periscope, it's going to complete that process in Periscope. And once we actually start using BPro, anything new in BPro will continue in BPro until we phase out all of Periscope S2G. So there's still going to be a little bit of overlap time where we'll be using both until we transition completely to vPro, which we're hoping is going to happen sometime September, October. Any other questions? Okay, while we're giving the audience a chance, Candace and Angela, if you don't mind, what is the typical contract term on average for most of our janitorial or grounds maintenance agreements?
Janitorials are 5 years.
Initial 3-year
2-year
with two
initial.
1-year renewal options?
Initial 2-year.
Initial 2-year with 3 1-year options?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, and Donna, most of the contracts now have moved from a 3-year contract into the 5-year contract. So most of our continuing term contracts are 5 years.
Awesome, thank you. Definitely good information. I am scanning the Q&A. I haven't seen any new ones pop up. I'll give it a last call. And then we've got a few additional slides I wanted to share with everyone about upcoming events, things you should be aware of. Give me 1 second. Okay, here's another. What about moving and storage companies? It would still be the same answer. Thank you for that, Pranette. Yes, when we do procure services, it can be done on an individual agency by agency process. However, that's going to be a smaller dollar value. And that's where we'll get multiple quotes. Most of what we do procure is going to be competitively solicited, and it's going to be posted where everyone can respond. The way it works is the Office of Economic and Small Business Development reviews solicitations for goods and services from all of our county agencies before they're advertised to see if there's an opportunity for small business participation. If there is, and we have a sufficient number of small businesses that provide the required services or goods, we'll establish a small business participation goal and it gets advertised that way. If not, it will be solicited without one, but it would still be the same process.
Donna, and there's some more questions that have been put in the chat, not in the Q&A section. We have question, any guidance on how to navigate that page? I assume that's about the vPro page. And then another question. Okay,
I can chime in on that one, and Janae, then if you don't mind reading the others. So to navigate the page, once you use the QR code, you'll land on the Purchasing Division's website. There are several links on the left-hand side. One will tell you, do you want to register Periscope S2G, which is still relevant because, as I said, until we completely transition to vPro, there will still be opportunities in Periscope S2G. There is a guide, an actual step-by-step guide that tells you what to do when you're registering for vPro. It's fairly simple. It's going to be your company's contact information, the services that you provide, who you want listed as your point of contact, but especially the services that you provide, because as Angie and Candace said, this is what's going to queue up any invitations that may be sent to you. It's going to be based on what you say you provide. So keep an eye out on that. But there's guidance on the actual website page. Janae, did you have any others?
Our next question, Gustavo says, wondering if it is a plus to be a union member.
We don't make that a part of our requirements or our small business goals reviews, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. I wouldn't say it's a plus or a minus. I don't know if Candace or Angela wanted to chime in, or if they thought my answer was sufficient.
I think your answer is sufficient.
Thank you.
And we had another question in the Q&A that's about, will they have access to this recording? And yes, this will be posted on YouTube after the series is complete.
Okay. Let me double check the Q&A really quickly, make sure there are no others. It was the same question in the Q&A. Will we have access to this recording after the session. Yes, not immediately after the session. Give us till the end of the series to at least start posting the first one, or maybe a couple of days after. Only because we're actively engaged in putting out and promoting the sessions. So give us a couple of days. I would say maybe by next week. I don't want to speak for the team, but give us a little time to get them up, but they will be on our YouTube page. When is the transition to B Pro going to be finished? Well, the latest date that I heard, I think, was in September. So to hedge against caution, I would say September, October is when you should start expecting to see some of those new solicitations. We're ramping up in the background. Our purchasing division is actively doing whatever is needed to be done to make sure the system is up and ready. So that's what's happening, but there won't be a delay in service. We still have Periscope S2G, which will run until that transition happens. So it's advisable, just register for both for the time being. Okay, let me just double check. I think we got all the questions. I'll hold for a second if anybody had one that hasn't been asked or answered.
The last question in the chat is the one that receive a link for the replay. You have to follow us on social media for that. And we are going to give you an opportunity to get all of our handles and be in the know.
Thank you for that. All right, we do have a couple more slides just with information, I think. I don't know if the one about FITSI is in there, but just for general information, we have oh, I just saw it move. Are we going to receive mail? Yes. I'm interested about special solicitations. For instance, for the holidays last year, I saw gift wrapping or Christmas decor. That might be a seasonal request. I'm not aware of anything popping up. And I'll be honest, I don't remember it crossing our desks to review for a goal. So we can look into it and see if there was an actual solicitation or if it was something done in relation to an offering from one of our parks. But let me look into that a little bit more. I don't want to tell you yes or no because I'm not as familiar with that. Okay, on the screen, as a matter of general information, for those of you who are interested in finding one location, one registration where you can view multiple solicitations, I invite you to take a picture of the QR code on your screen. It's the regional marketplace that's been put forth by the South Florida Anchor Alliance. There are 11 anchors, which include Broward County government, Miami-Dade County government, Broward County school boards, Miami-Dade school boards, several universities and hospitals are also partners. Registration is completely free, just like with Periscope S2G and with the new BPRO system. For the benefit of signing up with the South Florida Anchor Alliance is when you register, you'll also be able to see some of the solicitations that are being put out by the other anchors that are partners. And if you'd show the next slide, please. Thank you. Johnny mentioned our handles and our social media. We have a weekly e-newsletter, the Business Assistance Weekly, or the BAW, as we affectionately refer to it. That goes out every week. In fact, I think there may even be a Saturday reposting of it, but on Wednesdays, the new edition is sent out. If you'd like to be a recipient of our BAW, please feel free to send an email to econdevinfo@broward.org. There's also a QR code on your screen. So follow us in that way. I'll give everybody a second. Okay. You have a contract. Now, what I mentioned today is the first of 3 days within this current installment. For those of you that joined us in March, you'll know the format is pretty much similar to what it is now. It was March 11th, 12th, and 13th. On those 3 days, we had separate presenters with new content. It's going to be the same thing for August 5th, 6th, and 7th. Tomorrow, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we're going to have 2 different representatives from the Broward County Attorney's Office. As I mentioned before, the content that they're going to be addressing, it's going to be processes, procedures that as being awarded a contract, a new vendor, whether you're a sub vendor or a prime vendor, you should be aware. It's going to include elements of a contract, boilerplate language that's standard for Broward County contracts, the impact of the cone of silence and the violation thereof on your possible award, bid protests, suspension and debarment of vendors and how that affects current and future agreements. Stay tuned. That's not all they'll be talking about, but it will include best practices and tips for vendors. So the links are right now being posted in the webinar chat for you all. You can register. Again, registration is free, and it's going to be the same time frame, 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And if I could get the next slide, please. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, join us tomorrow and on Wednesday for the other installments for this series, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much.